Hello, YouTube. This is Yellow Man Red back after 4 months, but I've grown a lot. Time to get serious about this whole YouTube business if I need to get some money to get this farm. But anyway, I'm back with this video, and in this video, I'm going to ask the question: how many people are only still alive because they're poor? Think about it. If an angel came down from heaven and gave you $1 million on the spot, no strings attached, would you find some way to kill yourself? That's an honest question. If you had money and free time to the same extent as, say, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, all those fellas, say what you want about them, they haven't killed themselves. I don't think the average person would survive a year if they had their level of wealth because they don't really need to work. If they decided to stop working, they have enough money for generations, so that's not an issue. But for normal people, that is a good question because if you look at yourself, like what do kids do on summer break? I know what I did: jerked off, played video games, wasted away. If my entire life was like how I live summer, I'd be dead. And when you think about it, how many alcoholics, functional or not, or any other druggies, really, would kill themselves if they had enough time? Just enough time indulging in their vices and enough money to do so. How long until they just kill themselves? That's a real question. Like, for example, a thought came to me the other day of, say, druggies on the road. We call them Joneses in the Bahamas. The Joneses on the road. Like, when you think about it, you could say they're protected by God because if they had money, they'd be dead. In that same way, as pertains to alcoholics and such, like, if alcoholics had enough money and free time, functional or not, they'd be dead. They'd kill themselves. Like weed especially. Like, imagine all you fellas who smoke weed. Like, think about people who smoke weed regularly. If they had enough money and free time where they could afford to just sit around for months or maybe even years without needing to work, because there are people who are wealthy enough to afford to do that comfortably for years, for generations, what would they do? Smoke weed, jerk off, play video games? They'd, they'd be killing themselves slowly and falling into decay because their needs are met and are comfortable. And that's the thing. That's what I think a lot of people don't realize. Well, in a way, your job is essentially the only thing keeping you alive. Because when you are because when you are free, when you do have the free time, what do? You kill yourself. You drink, you smoke weed. Your idea of fun and living and enjoying life is destructive and a danger to your life. So is it no wonder why most people are working? Why the normal person has to work? Sure, there's problems with it, and you could say, "Oh, I know there'd be some." I don't want to insult them, but some little goober in the comments saying maybe they're working because they have to, and they do all these things, these drugs and such because it's the job. Their job is driving them to do it. You're saying the wrong thing. Shut up. I know. I know what you're going to say, and I'm telling you that's not the issue. There's something deeper. Even if you took away their job, they'd still do the same thing. It's something deeper. So be quiet with that kind of talk. But it's not just, Joneses, druggies, it's not those type of people that do that. It's everyone. Me, you, everyone does it to some extent where when we're not working towards something, we destroy ourselves. And if we didn't have to work, if we weren't poor, or if our access to our vices weren't limited by our circumstances, if we didn't have to work, if we didn't have to essentially pay to live, we would destroy ourselves inevitably given enough time. Like, like think about it. Think backward to when you were a child. I know my parents did it. Most people I knew growing up, my adults did it. What do they do when they're off work? Is it anything productive? Did they read? Yeah, they read the Bible sometimes, yeah. Fairly regularly too. Go to church, yeah, sure. But what was it most of the time? They weren't exercising, but they were watching sports, they were drinking, they were doing a lot of things that were destructive to themselves. A lot of people, myself, and if you be humble for a minute, dear viewer, yourself as well. You're killing yourself and decaying in real time. It's an unfortunate circumstance that is the condition of man that, well, not, I would say a condition of man. We can rise above, and I will tell you, well, some of my advice and things I've learned how to rise above it. But it's a, it's a fact that you have to learn that most people hate the fact they have to work so hard. They have to work to live. They toil all their lives. They have to spend all this time away from their homes, their family, their comfort, their vices. But it's a really humiliating, well, humiliation is something you should embrace sometimes, but it's a humbling thing to admit that that is keeping you somewhat functional. Because that's the word to describe most people, somewhat functional. I describe myself as that. I describe nearly every human being as that. Very few people are fully functional, but it's this thing. It's work forces you to take a step away from your vices and to adopt virtues such as hardworking. You're hardworking. That is a virtue. The virtue of hard work. You're willing to work hard. That is a virtue. Industriousness is a virtue. Ingenuity is a virtue. Sobriety is a virtue. Labor and work forces you to get off the complacency horse, to get off the race to the bottom, to get out of the bucket of crabs. Labor is the hand of the fisherman that picks you up and throws you back in the water out of the bucket. You keep trying to climb in, almost like a suicidal crab. It's like, I actually wrote this down. God protects hedonists and addicts by making them work. So, in a sense, poverty is a blessing and a shield for most human beings, including you and me, because it limits our ability to partake in vices and forces us, at least temporarily, to adopt good morals. It's a humbling thing to admit that work, as much as we don't like it, it may very well be the thing that keeps most human beings alive. Like, most people probably couldn't handle being rich. I thought about this as a child. Like, if I had Jeff Bezos' money, or Bill Gates' money, or whatever rich person of the week's money, would I find a way to kill myself with it? I remember when I was 16, I was horny as hell. Who says I wouldn't just buy a bunch of prostitutes and just die of some venereal disease or something? As sick or as gross as that sounds, what do you think a lot of men would do? Go to these bars every week? What would they do? Drink until they die? You like to party? Some people like to go to the clubs, but you go to these fancy high-end clubs. What are they doing? Oh, they're taking cocaine. Why not? Like, people don't really sit down and think for a minute. Like, could I handle be having money? Do I have enough self-control? Like, no offense, average people, me and you, but I'm diabetic and I sometimes get tempted and I do eat cake. I ate a slice early today. It's like, if I'm a diabetic and I don't have the will to always say no to cake, what makes you think I'd always say no to all the things money could buy? And that's a real thought. But I just want to bring this out in air and I want you to meditate on this. Are you still alive because you're poor? People keep praying, the prosperity gospel is a real big thing. I hate that. God never promised you a dime on earth. He promised you riches in heaven. Big difference. But it's a real thing nobody really thinks about because, there's a place for all of us on earth. And if it's God's will for you to be a pauper all your life, you should accept it humbly. Because personally, I don't think I could take being rich to that extreme. I don't know if my vices would destroy me. And I just want people to think about that for a moment. Like, if you weren't poor, if you could afford to indulge in every vice, in every impulse you had, would it really add to your life? Is you being poor a good reason as to why you're healthy now, to why you're of sound mind? A lot of celebrities, rock stars, and such, they die of drugs all the time, overdose. A lot of rock stars died like that. A lot of businessmen we don't hear about on the news, but I imagine a whole lot of executives, high businessmen, people with money, drugs, disease, sickness. They have all this money but no self control. They had the self control to get to that position, but again, if you have the money to afford a donut every morning, why wouldn't you buy it? Now you're obese. It's just something to think about, and it's a very interesting meditation. Like, poverty is, in a sense, God's protection. It's it's humbling, but yeah, I'd like you all to meditate on that. And as to avoid this, I'd say you'd have to get anchored within yourself. That's another thing. I'd say the only solution I really have for this in my mind would be to be up to have a firm foundation within yourself. Like, you know yourself, you know what makes you happy long term, and you're rooted in Christ. I'd say that's the only antidote to this. Because money, it sways you, really, in my mind. It sways you. It sways you to the path you know you shouldn't be on, but could be on because you could afford it. But anyway, that's the video. Look forward to making more of these. This is Yellow Man Red going off. See you later, YouTube.